So we are in the part of town that we want to be in. The story I'm going to bring to you is the murder of a man named James B. Morrow, who shortly after midnight, November 21st, 1901, was gunned down in this area. Oh yeah, see, homes like this kind of stuff was here back in. And that one's just kind of by itself because it's all commercial around here. But this used to be a lot more residential way back around the turn of the century. This was all mostly housing. And James B. Morrow, he was last seen up around 16th and Cooch, 16th and Sandy area, many blocks north of here in that direction. So he was obviously going south, going this direction if he's going to end up down in this area. And I'm approaching right ahead here. This is 8th and Mill, southeast 8th and Mill. And Morrow would have been going from here and then crossing the street and going in this direction. So here we are, we're stepping onto 8th Avenue, where Morrow would have been coming from. Apologize for the wind. So he would have been going this direction. We are at 8th and Mill right now. There's the signage, 8th and Mill. Morrow would have been walking right this direction. You'll note it's all commercial. And he was heading towards 8th and Stevens, which is the next intersection. Somewhere right here, in between the two blocks, in between here and in between there. He was gunned down right here by two assailants. Two assailants gunned down James Morrow right here. So, as the story goes, Morrow left this house up around Cooch and 16th, where he was visiting family, friends, around 11:40, 11:45, a little bit before midnight, making his way this direction. Sometime between midnight and 12:30 a.m. Would be when the gunshots rang out. I would say when people heard gunshots, but apparently, I don't know if people heard them or not. This is a residential neighborhood. James Morrow was gunned down right here, and yet nobody in the area called the police. This is a little bit after midnight. It wouldn't be till almost 4 in the morning that a milk truck driver doing their early rounds was coming down 8th Avenue right here and saw James Morrow's body lapsed on the ground. He probably figured he was a drunk or just someone who passed out, having too good of a time, but obviously when he stopped and looked a little bit closer at the situation, he realized the guy that he found lapsed out on the sidewalk had been lying here dead for over 3 hours. And so law enforcement was called to the scene, and obviously everybody kind of had the initial impression it's probably just a drunk guy, we'll stir him up, and then they discovered, nope, this was a murdered man, and that's why he was not getting up and moving. So this was very unfortunate for the victim in terms of the authorities knowing who to track down. This was just, it seemed to be a random murder that happened right here. They have, they don't know who the suspects could be. They don't know who would have a reason to attack James Morrow, who apparently was just a run-of-the-mill guy, no real enemies or anything like that. And now whoever did him in has had a couple hours head start on law enforcement. For all they know, they could have split town by now. Oh, and it was a graphic murder too. It was real quick. It was done in a matter of a second or two. But it seems Morrow was just walking along, and these men just stepped up in front of them, and he was actually shot through one of his eyes. The bullet went through his eye, through his brain, just shattered his brain, and lodged in the back of his head. He dropped down and was dead instantly. Alright, so we're about a block and a half. If you go directly across where this power station is, right on the other side, that's 8th and Stevens, so a little bit further down the intersection, like right there, that's where Morrow was gunned down. And I'm on 9th now, just to show you how close he was to getting home, because he lived at 9th and Lincoln. So again, we're at this point, we're about 2 blocks straight shoot from where the shooting occurred. And literally, this intersection right here that I'm coming up to. This is 9th and Lincoln, which, like so much else in the area, it's all commercial properties pretty much now. Except no, there's actually a house here. That was unexpected. But other than that, I don't know. This is a pretty old house. I don't know if it dates back to 1901, but it's all commercial properties the rest of the way. But this is the intersection where Morrow lived. You know, only about 2.5 blocks. He was only about 2.5 blocks from getting home before he was gunned down. It was that close. And this crime seemed destined to maybe go unsolved, since, you know, the criminals had a head start and all that. But within 3 days of the shooting, 2 fellows named Joseph Ewing and William H. Strickland were arrested as the 2 men that came up on Morrow, seemingly snuck up on him, even though they shot him through the front of his face. I think the idea was put forward that they maybe crept up from around the corner, crept up from behind, and somehow, you know, maybe they were sneaking up behind him and he turned, and therefore they shot him in the face. They could have been coming from behind or snuck up from the front. It's hard to say for certain, one or the other. They were probably arrested just on suspicion. They were both commonly known criminals in the area. It would not be a stretch that they would, you know, attack someone. And they both, their story was, they thought James Morrow was somebody else. They thought he was another guy that they knew as a local gambler in the area who was known for carrying large sums of money, and they thought, hey, we'll rip this guy off. But I mean, if they were trying to argue that this was just a straight robbery, that story was not going to hold water, because it was obvious whoever killed Morrow came up on him and shot him immediately. It was not a, give me all your money, Morrow tried to fight back, Morrow resisted, and then got shot as a result of that. He was crept up on and murdered in cold blood, about as cold-blooded of a murder as you can do. So these guys, in trying to maintain that this was mistaken identity, they still couldn't, you know, that's all fine and dandy, but they couldn't explain away the fact that this was a cold-blooded murder they engaged in. Whether it was the right guy or not is irrelevant. You know, because it was obvious if they were intending on robbing a well-to-do gambler, it was obvious they were planning on shooting him dead before they took his money. And, you know, if that wasn't dumb enough, they both, when they were in custody, this was their undoing. Ewing essentially said that he stood a block away. This is when they're being interrogated. He stood a block away when he heard the shot, unaware that... Sorry, no, this is what Strickland said. Strickland said that he stood a block away while Ewing went up and committed the murders. He apparently didn't know what was going to happen. He thought, I thought he was just going to rob him, and then he shot him. I didn't know what to do. Okay, so then you move on over to Ewing's side of the story. He says that they were together when the shooting occurred, and said that he got up behind Morrow, so snuck up behind Morrow, and then Strickland came in from the front with the revolver and ordered hands up. Morrow complied, but Strickland shot him anyway, so they both threw each other under the bus. Strickland implied he was loitering a block away. Why you be loitering a block away while you're with your buddy trying to commit a robbery together? It's not like you have a getaway car or something. It's 1901. Nobody has cars yet. So I don't... That was just a dumb story. But he was, of course, trying to disassociate himself from the story by being like, well, I was there and I thought he was just going to commit a robbery. And then, lo and behold, he shot the guy. But I was standing off here. I didn't do anything. And then, of course, the other side, Ewing says they're there together. They come from opposite directions, so I guess he can't run away. Yeah. Ewing's story is a lot more believable. Ewing is much more believable in this case, of this idea that one of them snuck up behind Morrow, the other came up in front, so they had him surrounded. That sounds much more like something criminals might do. And that It was actually Strickland who, I'm sorry, they had other names they went by, so I keep mixing them up, so I'm trying to make sure they're the right people. Strickland's the guy that says he was hiding. Ewing says Strickland was the guy that had the gun, and that he pointed the gun at Morrow, told him to put his hands up, and even as it seemed Morrow was complying, Strickland shot him anyway. That story as a whole seems to carry a lot more water. It sounds more like something criminals might do. But at the same time, it kind of throws their whole defense, which was this idea that they shot the wrong person, into disarray, because if they know this guy so well, if they know this guy and he's this well-known gambler who's got money, they know him so well that they spot him randomly on the street and decide to pursue him. They sneak up on him. One of them is standing right there in front of him, looking him right in the eyes. There's this few moments where he's got the gun pointed at him. He's like, put your hands up, we're going to rob you. And yet he still shoots him. And it's like, wouldn't you know in those few seconds for certain whether this was the right guy or not? Because it wasn't the right guy when all is said and done. That's the conflict in all this. So even that story, as more believable as it is, Ewing's story is more believable, even though it does throw his buddy under the bus, and maybe it was Ewing that was standing in front saying, put your hands up, and shot him anyway. I don't believe either of those stories. I think either this was just a cold-blooded murder with robbery as the potential reward to come as a result of it, or maybe some of that second story is accurate, that they snuck up on a guy and shot him. But in that vein, I don't think, oh cool, it's one of these. These are a rare find in the city. Sorry, I got distracted for a moment. These are old rings that people would tie their horses up to. You can still find them scattered around the city. You know, history. But yeah, but I don't buy that they thought this was so-and-so. They snuck up on him, murdered him, and then it was the wrong guy and they just split. If I had to put something together, you know, maybe it was a mistaken identification, but if it was, I still think when all is said and done, whoever the guy was, whoever they thought the guy was, they just snuck up on him and gunned him down in cold blood. It didn't matter who he was. They were going to kill him anyway. And that's why they needed to be busted and convicted for their crimes, as they were. And that, my friends, is it. A little scatterbrained because this name's getting mixed up. Every freaking criminal in the history of the world back then had an alias. So I'm having to mix up the aliases. I'm trying to remember which names are the real names and then which real names apply to the aliases of each guy. And I wasn't born for this. I'm too old for this. But that is the story, the very tragic story of the perceivably mistaken identification that led to the murder of a guy named James Morrow, who by all accounts was just kind of a average run-of-the-mill man about town who literally, cliche though it is, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. It sucks. You know, how many people have had to die under those circumstances? And on that morose note, thank you again, as always, so much for watching this new episode of Historic Murders of Portland from southeast Portland. Close to the river, though. Kind of where industrial just meets general, commercial, whatever. And remember, as always, to like, share, subscribe, comment, hit up my Patreon if you so choose. And until next time, everybody, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland. Take care of yourself.